LeFauve, who is joining us at Anima, and we're very thankful to have her this year to present a masterclass tomorrow morning on screenwriting. Meg has an amazing career, and she has worked on films such as Inside Out and Inside Out 2, The Good Dinosaur, and she also worked with Marvel and on different series and films. You also started your career as a producer, I saw. And to open this discussion, so the idea would be I will ask one or two questions and then we open it to the floor, of course. Can you tell me how you started, from a producer point of view, how did you start to write?
I was a writing major in college and then got very frightened that I had nothing to say, no stories to tell, and said, okay, then I'm not a writer, which of course is funny because that's exactly what a writer would think. And then I went into, my mother was a painter and my father was an engineer. So I went towards the engineer part of me and was like, I'll be a producer, I will engineer these movies. I ended up working with Jodie Foster for 10 years, which is a long time in Hollywood. And we made movies as producers, some that she's in, some that she wasn't. But I learned a lot of what I know from her, because she taught me to approach story almost from an actor or a director point of view, because that's how her brain works, obviously. So it's very character-based, very emotionally, thematically based. But my brain, we were going to renew the deal at Paramount, and I just had that voice in your head, like, do you want to be 85 and never know what you could have done as a writer? And I also had a wonderful husband who told me, you either go be a writer or stop complaining about it, right? I won't say the phrase he said because it's not appropriate, which is basically shit or get off the pot, which is very American. But at the time I was offended, but it was a loving act to say, I love you, you can do it. So I took Jodie to lunch and I said, I don't think I'm gonna stay with you and renew the deal. And she said, oh good, I don't wanna renew it either. And I said, well, why are we doing it? And I said, I'm doing it for you. And she said, I'm doing it for you. And they're like, okay, stop. So I left Jodie and then immediately became zero in Hollywood. When you work for Jodie Foster, everybody wants to talk to you, everybody wants to know you, you have chips to play. Now you're a struggling screenwriter, you find out very quickly who are your friends, right? Your real friends and who is part of Hollywood. But I had a close group of friends who were cheering me on. And then eventually I started to write scripts and get an agent and etc. And the day that I got nominated for the Academy Award, that morning, all those friends who had stayed with me and cheered me on came to my house to, see me off. So it was a transition of, to be at the top of something and stop to go back down to the bottom. It's scary, it's a hard thing to do, but I had a lot of support from my husband to do that. So.
Okay. And how did you come to write animation? Because it's, of course, I guess, different from action.
Well, it's funny because it is, of course, in its process, because you're working with storyboard art. The actual process of writing is different. It's almost a hybrid to me of feature and TV. Because the form that you're writing is feature, but it's very like TV, and then you're in a room with storyboard artists. It's such a collaboration. But the storytelling is the same, at least with Pixar and Disney Animation and with Cartoon Saloon. It's still the same questions that you would ask in a live action feature. It's all what I'm going to talk about tomorrow applies to animation or live action. I was not a writer who was dying to write animation. But I was dying to work for the best storytellers. And at that time, it's before the renaissance of TV in America, Pixar was the best storytellers in the world. And I had heard that they had this thing called a brain trust, in which what you're writing goes into the brain trust, and the best storytellers in the world take it apart. And that was like the scariest, most exciting thing I could think to do to learn to be a better writer. So I kind of set it as a beacon way out on the water. And people would say, they don't hire writers, they have Andrew Stanton, but it's what I thought would make me a better writer. So I just I tried to find people who knew people, who's the one looking at the scripts, how do you which is, again, I guess now using my context from working with Jody, suddenly they tell me that they work for you, right? Because you can call around. And eventually it worked, and I had a script that they thought fit with what they were looking for in terms of you were able to create a story, structure, theme, character, and by the way, and you can do funny. So I went up and met with Pete Docter, and I didn't know what the movie was, of course, but I knew it was to write with him. And I think now my producer experience, like you don't know where you're gonna go in the world, right? You think, I'm off track. I'm not writing, I'm off track. But I don't know that I could have worked at Pixar and gotten that job if I didn't have producer experience, because I understood where they were in the process, the amount of pressure, what he needed was somebody to talk to him about his movie, not be a writer coming in and telling him what I think your movie is. It was trying, somebody working with a writer trying to pull out, what are you trying to say, right? Which made him more comfortable to write with me, right? I wasn't trying to take it over, or I was trying to use my skill to help him tell his story, which is a writer's job. With a director, though a lot of writers don't say that. I won't say this is the press, I won't say that. But so that's, I think, it was a beautiful thing that all of my skill set could suddenly come together to help him tell his story.
Mm-hmm. We have questions? Who wants to go first? Yeah.
Hello, Meg. Thanks for being here today with us and answering your questions. I was wondering, what would be your number one tip to an aspiring writer?
Okay. Well, it's funny, I get that question a lot. So I started a podcast called The Screenwriting Life, in which it really was just to talk to emerging writers. So about a topic or bringing in people, but it wasn't just craft. It was also, how do you do this as a life, as an artist? How do you put yourself out there and get rejected? How do you write script after script, draft after draft after draft after draft, and it's still not working? How do you do that, right? So now we have, a lot of listeners, and we started a workshop site because the emerging writers who aren't always kids want more hands-on help. So we started a workshop site. So I very much believe in mentoring young writers. I think that I have a lot of advice. Obviously, I have a whole podcast and a workshop site trying to give advice about it and help. But I think my number one advice to emerging writers, because they can be any age, of course, is when you're emerging, you're just starting, it is quantity over quality. They get very nervous if this is the one script, the one draft, this has to prove everything about my value as a writer. And that's too much pressure to put on one poor story. And you probably have to write at least 5 more, 10 times each, to even find yourself as a writer, hear your voice, what do you love, what are you good at, what don't you, there's the craft layer of layers and layers of craft that have to happen, right? And I think the other thing they worry about, and why I say quantity, is young writers, but I think they worry, like all of us, that their creative well, do you know what I mean? The well of your creativity, has an inch of water in it. So when you give them notes, they go, but this script won the contest. Now you want me to blow it up? Yeah, I do. I want you to blow it up. Because I know that there's not an inch of water, there's an ocean. But they don't know that. And the only way your brain trusts that there's an ocean is doing it over and over. And every time you go back, there's something fills the well up again. Every time. But it's scary. You don't know. It's very scary to believe that an idea will come, you'll figure this out. The only way you learn that is just quantity. Just go again, go again, go again. Which also I learned at Pixar, because you go so many times if you can't believe it. The director of Inside Out 2 and I realized that from the first script we wrote, which would be close to the first, what you guys call animatic, we call it just a screening, the storyboard screening, to the film that was released, maybe 3 things are the same, 3 shots. That's all gone. It's in there because we had to go through this to get to this, to get to this. So that wouldn't exist without this first one, but there's very little left of just the churn of go again, go again, go again. So quantity over quality.
First of all, it's an honor to meet you, so I'm happy to be here. Your movies usually relies on duos, two characters that have to resonate with each other. Can you elaborate how it's important for you to have this kind of dynamic?
It's a lot of Pixar movies are that, right? They're kind of buddy movies, a lot of them. So you get trained in that as you go through that process. Midnight Run, there's a lot of kind of classic movies that you watch to learn that dynamic of a buddy comedy. And a buddy comedy can, of course, also be rom-coms, and it doesn't have to be, it can be a romance or whatever. But it's funny, I don't think about it so much like I always love to do buddy movies. I think more, I like relationships. And I like that people figure out who they are in relationship to someone else. And that if you had not, when I worked for Jodie, she would say to the writer, why this antagonist for my protagonist? Why of all the people my character could meet in the world, is this the person that's gonna crack them open? Why? Like, she needed to know that as an actor, right? So there's something of that main relationship might be with the antagonist, it might be like with sadness, it might, it shifts around, but I like pushing a character into behavior in relationship, because I think that's what we care most about, is the relationships. We care about the plot and it's fun, but really what your heart is starting to hang on to is the relationship in the movie. So, and buddy movies are, when you put two opposites together, it's easier than two people who are very similar. They're not going to push each other very hard, right? But that's all still an interesting movie. It's just higher math. You know what I mean? Higher story math to have them similar. So.
Hi, Meg. What can you tell us about the rewriting process? Isn't it better to have somebody else doing the script doctor? And when do you know that the problem is in the dialogue or in the structure of itself when you rewrite the story?
I'm going to talk a lot about that tomorrow. So my brain is trying to put it down into a couple of sentences, which you can tell I'm not very good at. Because I'm more of a teacher, so I want to get in and teach, but I'm not going to. I'm going to try to give it a soundbite. Almost every note goes back to Act 1 and the engine of the story. And if you really understand that, every time you start a new draft, you open a blank document. You re-outline the whole thing. Because to me, a problem in dialogue is like saying there's a problem in the wallpaper, but the whole foundation of the house doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Or another way to say it is, I like to explain to emerging writers, notes are a symptom of a disease, and you are the doctor, and you have to figure out the disease. They will try to tell you what the disease is, but that you are the expert of your story. What is that note telling you about a deeper problem? And sometimes it can be very seemingly innocent, or, oh, it's just them, or they'll say, when I came on to Inside Out, John Lasseter said to me, nobody likes joy, fix that. And that's a huge note. That is just a huge, huge note. Because I don't worry about likability, but what he was saying was nobody cares about joy. They're not attaching to her as a character in any way. That's a huge, blow this thing up problem. Because that's a first act problem, you're not attaching. So rewriting to me is diagnosing from at Pixar, literally hundreds of notes you get. And then I sit with the director, and from his memory, because you will remember the things that deeply impact you, not kind of going through paper, but okay, let's write on the board the big notes, and then you start to diagnose, oh, that's actually a symptom of this, that's a symptom of this, this is the big note. So for the next week, we're just going to talk about that. And then when you fix that, a lot of these start to poof away and go away. But if you are a young writer and you get your notes, the dialogue, this, that, blah, 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 and you open your draft and you just go through page by page, you just get a whole new set of symptoms because you didn't change the core problem underneath. So that's how I do it. I do it really deep. Now, I'm writing with my husband now, and sometimes he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't need to blow up the whole thing. And I'm like, we do. So you have to be a bit careful that you don't go too far and keep blowing it up. At some point it starts to, you can't knock it down. You know, it holds. It starts to hold. The center starts to hold. So that's how I do it.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Next. He can't see you, I think, on this angle. Now go ahead.
I'm Diane, it's very nice to be here and to meet you. I was wondering if you ever felt like pressure knowing that Inside Out might affect how people, specifically children, understand their own emotions?
Yes, I know that right before I came to Pixar to work on Inside Out, there had been a worry about this. The dinner scene, where Riley's at dinner, you're popping in their heads, was actually a test that they did, because they were worried, would you know whose head you're in if you're popping around? And then they did another test. I think it was afraid to jump off a diving board, and they brought a lot of their kids in to see could they understand, and they understood better than we did. They're much closer to all of that than we are, right? So at Pixar, you don't write two kids. You write the best story, and then the kids get it. And I do love that Inside Out especially has these levels of almost what in America we would call Looney Tunes. You know, like that kind of broad comedic humor that kids love.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also a whole line going underneath that as you age and you watch the movie, you will see something new every time, right? That's, you know, I think if you're writing a great story, it starts to have those layers, right, about what it means to be human. I'd say my most proud moment of Inside Out, the first one, was they asked me to go to an award ceremony that Pete couldn't go to in LA. And a woman walked up to me and said, we work for the city of Los Angeles, and your movie has made my job so much easier. And I was like, what's your job? And she said, I go in the night of the crime, the night of the trauma, to help those children. And I can immediately talk to them. I can immediately know where they are, what they're feeling, what's happening. And I thought, well, who needs an Academy Award? Right? And now I know they're using it with nonverbal children, and to be even a part of Pete Docter's vision that has rippled like that is such a privilege to have been part of that. But there was a lot of talk about could kids understand it, but they get it the best. Yep.
How did the idea of personifying emotions come about?
So Pete Docter, the director, he has a wonderful story so at Pixar, the directors are the ones who come up with the stories, and then you bring in writers and storyboard artists, and they pitch 3 ideas, and then the brain trust or whoever it is now, they choose which one to move forward with that one. So he pitched an idea based on his daughter, that when his daughter was young, she would meet everybody at the front door doing a tap dance, just full of joy, out there, confident. And then she turned 11, and and as a father, it broke his heart. And he had a question, what happened to my daughter's joy? And I want to go in her head and find out. So that's how it starts. And a lot of their movies are very personal to them, the directors. They have a question that they're asking. But then to find the answer took many tries, right? Because he was also, mourning that as a parent, you ever look at a picture of your little kid and you're like, right? I have this big man sitting next to me, but this little boy is that kind of grief in a weird way, and mourning of the child that's gone. It's just in your memories now. But it wasn't really giving that relational experience, right? That's an idea of a situation, but that's not a relational experience. And he paired joy first with fear, but then realized he didn't have anything to say about fear. Mm-hmm. What are you trying to say about human fear? And when I came on, he was just starting to have an idea. Maybe it's sadness. Maybe it's about sadness can connect us. And I said, that idea will change the world. And he said, don't ever say that again. It's too much pressure. We're just gonna go have fun and write a story. So the idea, he had done a lot, when I came on the film, he had done a lot of research, and they had picked their 5 emotions, with Dr. Keltner and all these great emotional experts. I think when they started, they had 25 crazy. But they picked 5. And they had some lands that they wanted to go to, but they didn't have a story yet that was working. So that's what I came in and started working with sadness. So it's Pete's genius idea, Pete Doctor, who came up with balloons on a house and, you know, this incredible imagination and artistry coming from Pete Doctor.
So it's personal for him. Is it personal for you? Did you go into your memories from teenage years to come up with some
Yes.
parts of Inside Out for him too?
I think that's the really tricky part about being a writer, because my job is to write what the director's vision is and really get down into what they're trying to say and help them go there. And I find that once you go deep enough, now everybody can relate to it, because it's about being a human being. So I definitely could understand what sadness is. He had already had the decision that was moving. It was an idea on the board. I had moved many times as a child, but I didn't realize how personal it was until I had to write the scene where Riley comes home and tells her parents, basically, you want me to be happy, but I'm not. I had to write that scene so fast because all the board artists were waiting for it, and it was so great because I didn't have time to question myself, stuff it down, you know. I was like, oh! And I don't know how you write that in your article, and I was like, there. And then we had the big screening, and that scene came up, and I was like, oh. That's what I wanted to say to my parents when I was 11 years old. You want me to be happy, but I'm not. And how brave Riley was to say it, right? Most kids don't. And it was very important to me that unlock her parents to admit that they too are sad about it, that they have this, again, relational experience together that brings them all closer, that she and her bravery unlocks their sadness, that they probably weren't even talking to each other about. And then, this is too much for an article, but just FYI, that's why the scene where Riley's mom sits on the floor where she's in her sleeping bag and says, you know, Joy inside is like, I don't know what's happening, this is chaos, and all the other emotions are running to the console, like they're ready to tell mom and get mad at mom and cry, they're ready. And mom says, thank you so much for being our happy girl. It means so much, your dad's under so much pressure. This is not a bad mother, it's a very thing that every parent has said, right? But it's giving Joy the reason that she has to keep driving. This isn't because Joy's an egomaniac, or she's been told, you keep Riley happy, right? And it was the same in Inside Out too. I was a very anxious child and anxious woman right now. And so my director so we spent, oh my gosh, months all through COVID, which was a very anxious time, talking about anxiety and how it works. And I have, in my talk tomorrow, I'm going to talk about belief systems and how you build a character with them. So I have a lot of experience with belief systems. And, you know, I think that's one of the most powerful things in the movie that people aren't talking about yet. Because anxiety has understandably taken so much of the attention of Inside Out too, which is a great character. You know, she means the best for Riley. She has a terrible plan to get it. But she means well. She loves Riley, she's trying to help her. But the belief systems is an incredibly profound idea. Who you believe you are is just what you believe. Your sense of self is built from what you believe, from experiences you've had. And all you have to do is ask the question, is that true? Am I bad at math? Or did I get 1B and my mom was so disappointed that it's better just to believe I'm bad at math than ever face that again, right? So much of our identity is made up of that. I think it's such a profound, powerful idea for people. But because there's so much else going on, I think the movie that's why that Inside 2 will take a long time, because there's even more to discover in the movie that hasn't even been talked about, right? So, yes, it's always got to be personal, or I don't know how to write it, right? I'm not the kind, like when you say script doctors, I think those people are amazing, that they can go in and just machine gun jokes everywhere. I'm just like, wow, like it's such a specific skill. If you ask me to do that, I'm gonna be like, well, why is he here? You know, like I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it unless it's character. Yeah, still don't know how to do it.
So for quite some time now, a lot of people have been complaining about big animation studios, such as Pixar, for doing a lot of sequels and not new and original stories. What is your take on this?
My producer brain is, yeah, I get it. You know, this is a marketplace, and but also people love those characters. They impacted their lives in very deep, meaningful ways. So they want to see them again, and they want to have a new impact. So I think there is also an audience hunger for, at least, I'm not going to talk about other people's sequels, I don't know them, but in Pixar, I think that people are very hungry to go back and see those characters again. And, you know, think about Michael Arndt's Toy Story. Like, would he not have had that? Like, oh my God, you know? They're very hard to make. They're very, very, very hard to make because you have to be better than others. And with all the rules that are still, I don't know. So I get it. I understand why they do it. I do think Pixar's doing it the right way, which is the sequel is why we get to do the original. Like the originals are still coming. You know, it's not complete. But I do understand it.
Je ne sais pas si tout le monde a eu.
So first of all, hello.
Hi.
So we don't know when or if we're gonna see Riley again, following the question, but we've already seen her age a little between Inside Out 1 and 2. If we are to go back inside her heads, do you think there could be a movie, an Inside Out, about an adult mentality, or is the inspiration of a child necessary? Is the presence of a child and the aim of the movie has to be a child, or could it be towards an adult?
You know, I think Pixar's smart enough, they'll always say, what is it? What's the best story? That's the only rule I ever heard of Pixar. What's the best story? You know, people always want rules and worlds and all the stories connect and all the movies connect. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that, like we ever had time or ability to do that. So to me, it will be choosing the director who comes like with the best story. So when Kelsey came with the idea of anxiety hijacking, he could talk all about his own life, his anxiety at that age, his daughter, like he was very personal to him, which is important. But also he had a great idea. Anxiety hijacks the mind. So if you can come with a great idea, it could be anything, I think. I do think a lot of Pixar movies ultimately end up being about parenting sometimes. So they tend to have that child aspect, but I would never say never. I don't know. They're not asking me, so I don't know. I'm exclusively Netflix right now, so.
Maybe not talking about animation, but how do you see the evolution of representation of emotions in modern day cinema? Also regarding to the main character, the man, and the vulnerability. Is it easier now to explore those kinds of complex psychology and not only putting them as the big tough guys?
It depends on the movie you're doing and who the audience is, you know? I mean, I think great writers can take those archetypes that the audience is hungry for and still imbue them with a unique, specific humanity that they feel real and authentic. And those, I think, are the movies that do the outrageous box office because they have been able to do what I think is just so hard. To take the genre, take everything that audience wants, and still imbue it in the center with authenticity and human insight, as my husband says. That's very high level writing and math. So for me, in terms of, are you asking in terms of writing male characters? Every character, whatever gender, to me, it has to be authentically human. Now, how they adapt to the outside world challenges is more, to me, a psychological question. So Joy's adaptation to overwhelm is she'll figure it out, right? That's her adaptation to a problem, a challenge. She goes, I'll figure it out. That kind of optimism is actually response to overwhelm. So I go more that way, just as a human being, whatever gender. So if you said to me, just write the male archetype, I probably would be like, I don't know. That's not a person, right? So, and by the way, there are writers who do those big action movies like an amazing, well, they really know how to do that stuff, but it's just not what I do.
We talk a lot about Inside Out, and it's really with the sequel too. But I wanted to ask about the Good Dinosaur because
Oh,
I think
yes.
it's an underrated movie for me.
Thank you.
Can you talk a bit about the process of the writing
Yeah.
about this one? Just about creation.
I came in, when Pete Sohn was made the director of Good Dinosaur, and we had to go very fast. But again, it was working with Pete on, well, okay, now it's your movie, so what do you want to talk about emotionally? The inside here of this dinosaur. It was a reboot. I loved that movie so much, and I know it came out and it just was competing with all these other big Pixar movies. But that movie, for me, in terms of why is it personal, my father had died, and I was working through that, right? And I remember I wrote the scene in the cave where they're putting the sticks down to try to talk to each other, and they both realized they both had suffered tremendous loss. And we had to read it out loud to some of the brain trusts. Andrew Stanton said, that's gonna be one of my favorite scenes of a Pixar movie. And I was like, you know, it's just, your heart stops. But that came from me, from my experience of how do you ever tell another person the depths of your loss, right? And that these boys, because they're two boys, ultimately would bond over that. And one of the early versions of The Good Dinosaur was completely silent. It was so beautiful. But, you know, it evolves. So, yeah, I think it's an underrated movie too. Every once in a while I'll get an email from somebody saying, you don't know me, but my friend wanted me to send you this email, a friend of a friend, and the last one I got was a little boy who was 7, his father died. And he has watched the movie every single day for a year. Because his brain is trying to work it out. What is loss? What is this? What's happening? And again, that's such a sacred thing to have given to the world, to use. Even if it's not at the level of Inside Out ripple, it's still rippling. It is moving. And I try to explain that to writers sometimes. You don't know where the ripple, how big it will be, or where, it could be the smallest ripple, but it lasts the longest. I mean, look at like It's a Wonderful Life. When it came out, its ripple was that big. It's still going. It's still shifting people, right? So you just have to do your most authentic work and then go, I don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know what's gonna happen.
Well, so when you're writing quite often something personal, but at the same time you mentioned that on Pixar you need to rewrite and rewrite. So I was wondering, when you have to cut something that is very personal and important for you, how do you keep yourself motivated and creative to keep going?
It is hard. And sometimes it's just one of your fun scenes. Like in Inside Out 2, we had Procrastination Land, which was great. It was so funny. But Inside Out, both of them are 3 narratives. And if something happens in one, it has to affect the other 2. It's 3-dimensional chess. So Procrastination Land just wasn't working for Riley or for Anxiety. It just stopped their narratives. So how had to go. When it's deeply personal, sometimes like the mom, if it's about the story, like mom sitting and talking to Riley about thanks for being our happy girl, that was on the chopping block a lot, that they were worried, understandably, that people would not like mom. Is she being a bad mom? But that's where I'm gonna die on that hill, because it sets up Joy's entire goal. And if you take it out, the whole thing's gonna fall. So as a writer, I'm like, I will die on this hill. Other things, is it going to change the whole story? I love it. we had a scene, originally in Inside Out 2, we had a whole character named Shame. Anxiety was actually working for shame, because when you do the research about emotion, shame is the only bad emotion. It's not guilt, but shame is self-loathing. And so I really wanted to talk about girls at this age, self-loathing rising, because I think it's important. I think culturally it's taught, and it's so, but ultimately it was pretty dark. It really lessened anxiety story, but there was a scene where that I just loved. But I had to accept that the story itself wasn't what the director was. He didn't want to go that direction. And the studio was getting confused between shame and guilt, and I just had to let it go and say, this is not the way I'm going to express this particular insight. It's not going to be with this movie. Maybe it'll be with a different movie. Right? That's the only way you can do it. Like, well, I'll try to explore that in a different way somewhere else. And the rest, it is the director's movie. It is, I have to just shift, you just have to shift over. And you stay motivated because I'm fighting for the characters. And by fighting for a meaning, I have to go back because they're waiting for you to come back. Like I say to young writers all the time, a story has chosen you. Of all the people and all the writers in the world, it has chosen you. If you don't sit down and write, you're abandoning that sacred muse and has come and given you that story. And those characters are waiting. How long are you going to make them wait? Right? So for them, just go back. Even though you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot rewrite this one more time. Yes, you can. For joy, for variety, go back. Go back. For anxiety, it needs to learn her lesson.
When do you know you're done? Like, at what point you
Well, at Pixar, it's because the release date is coming. That's how you know you're done. When I'm writing on spec, I mean, I don't know. I've been to movie premieres with a director who's literally giving notes in it because it's never done. I don't know when it's done. As a writer writing specs, if you're starting to get feedback from people that you're giving it to, this is a movie, that's the first thing you need to hear. This is a movie, right? Which I talk a lot about in my seminar, what the difference is. And then you're just starting to get the feedback of, I loved this moment. This made me cry. You're getting a lot more of that positive excitement driving towards the story than, I don't really get this, and why did she do that? Like, it's just a tonal thing starts to shift in the story. And people start to like it or love it. And you're like, okay, it's starting to gel. Whatever we're trying to express. And sometimes you're writing all those drafts because I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. Like Inside Out 2, we spent a long time thinking that movie was about perfectionism. But we weren't underneath perfectionism, right? It was a good place to start, but we had to go deeper underneath that. What did that mean to this director? So you're just constantly digging down deeper. That's how
Pixar movies are really colorful. Is it also something that drives you, or for writers not that important? Because all the emotions are there, each of them has a color. And was it easier on the second part to rely on colors, or even on the first
Not
one?
so much. I mean, I'm sure like people like my husband, who's a visual artist and a painter, color would be really important. For me, it was more the character design. We had to earn bringing new emotions in. That's not just something you have to, where have they been? Like we had all kinds of sequences to explain where they've been and which didn't need ultimately to be in the movie. But I think the Good Dinosaur is the best example because we were moving so fast and we knew we were going to have T-Rex cattle, we were going to have T-Rex ranchers and there would be like cattle rustlers. Well, who's the cattle rustlers? I don't know. I'm just like writing so fast and all of a sudden from art comes dinosaurs with mullets, the haircut, and I was, okay, now I know who they are. So to me, the character design, and you're working with storyboard artists who very early there are no character designs. So those artists are just drawing, and this wonderful storyboard artist, I wish I remember his name, I should give him credit. He was doing that opening after the alarm goes off and all the emotions, at the time, all the emotions came in on the alarm. And embarrassment was huge. And I was like, oh, there he is. Like, it just made sense to me, like this big guy, and you could see his little butt crack in the back, and I'm like, suddenly you just know who he is, right, by his size, and him trying to get smaller, and we were, and the director and I were like, I don't think he talks. I don't think that guy talks. Like, no, it's embarrassing. Like, it was just starting to run watching this character arrive. So that to me helps, and of course, once it's cast, that's really helpful. You know, writing for Amy Poehler versus the guy who did Anger versus, you know, the voice starts to come much easier because you know who they are, and their tone of humor, and what they do very well. So that is also very helpful as a writer to have it cast. Though sometimes when I'm writing a spec, I'll just cast it in my head because it just helps me hear, and I can recast it, of course, and be like, that's not quite right. But actors bring a certain tone or tenor to a voice to the parts.
No.
So you've told us about rewrite and asking you to change things over and over and over. And so I wanted to ask you about identity and feeling of freedom. Did you still feel like it was your voice, or maybe when the first time you entered into Pixar, did you feel like you had to get into a sort of Pixar way of making things, a Pixar method, or did you think to yourself, no, they're the big house, but it's my voice they want to hear? How do you find your freedom in this?
You know, again, it's like television, so it becomes Pete Docter's the showrunner, and your job is to match his voice in a way. He is the visionary. Your job is to move towards, like a showrunner in a show, right? You're moving, and but it's not like TV in that I don't completely 100% adapt my voice to them. They still want you to be authentically you and bringing yourself, but it becomes like a blending, like an orchestra, right? Pete is the lead instrument for sure, and he is constantly setting that with every choice he's making, from the doorknobs to the everything, right? But it's the orchestra of Josh Cooley is the head of story, and he's the funniest guy I've ever met in my life, right? And then the co-director is Ronnie Del Carmen. Ronnie Del Carmen, as a storyboard artist, did The Hill and Up, right? He did in Wall-E, them in space, dancing. Like, he has this incredible, beautiful, emotional way of watching relationship and behavior that he just draws every day in the room. We'll just start laying out drawings, right? But all of those are coming together, the three of us, to form something to hand to Pete, right? So I never thought about my voice, and it needs to be my voice. That's not what you're doing. They want it. They want that specificity, that clarity to come in, but as an orchestra. And the storyboard artists are the same. They're also being very daring and drawing hundreds of drawings in their voice, but they have to draw the characters as the characters are drawn, and they have to, you know. So I think it's more as a symphony coming together than my voice. It's not really the job, I think. When I write my specs, or now I'm writing with my husband, and we're finding the voice together, which takes time, right? How to blend what we do so well together to create a third voice. Yeah. I think because I was a producer, it's never been my driving thing, is you need to hear my voice, right? I care about the story's voice. Does that make sense? What is the story's voice?
Maybe to complement, because you also wrote the screenplay of My Father's Dragon, which was on a completely different scale as Pixar. How did this experience go, and was it different?
It was different in that you didn't have as many screenings, right? Because it's a much smaller thing. And you know, Nora is her own director, so you adapt now to what Nora needs and what the story Nora is trying to tell. And you know, come on. I mean, not that Pixar art isn't amazing, but you know, Cartoon Saloon, oh my gosh, some of the most beautiful art in the world. So I just fully trusted them in terms of, even though we were a much smaller place working it, much smaller team. And it's different because in Pixar, you're at Pixar every day in your office, going to the meetings, at lunch with the swirling mass of people that you're working with. she's in Ireland. I'm in LA. So you're not, but I did go to Ireland for a while to write and be there with them, and their artists are all over the world. So she was very, very good at sending art and keeping me in that process, but it was different too, because you're not kind of in the soup with her every day. And it really is Nora's, you know, even she would be some of the voices in the temps, you know, so it's more auteur in that way, I think. I don't know, the doctor might hate that I said that. I don't know, you guys be careful, don't get me in trouble. Because it's a smaller shop, I think. But it was great, she's Nora's movie.
It's interesting because in this movie, there's like many ways to play with storytelling. It's someone will tell not his story, but the story of a father. The first 15 minutes takes time to connect with the young hero and his mother. The way the mythology expands, maybe can you talk a bit more how you play with the storytelling of the movie?
You're talking about the Good Dinosaur?
No. My Father's Dragon.
Oh, My Father's Dragon.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. Well, what was really challenging in a great way of My Father's Dragon is the book is for very, very young children. And we pitched that movie before I went on to Inside Out, and it was just, we tried to age it up, which is what people say to you, age it up, and we tried to age it up, and it really didn't work. But this is before Paddington, so nobody wanted to make movies for such a young audience. They didn't see an economic return. I did Inside Out, Paddington has come out, and that's sometimes what happens is the story is just not the right time. But because I did Inside Out, they would trust me more, and because Paddington came out, they could see, oh, you can make money at this audience, and so the stars just started to align, and we kept the story about for really it is a younger audience than 13-year-olds aren't. It's not the core audience, and I think that's okay. So we really had to. The book is very situational. He meets an animal, and he gives him something. He meets an animal. It's a story. It's a beautiful book, one that I read as a child and I read to my children. So I loved that book. But I wanted to figure out what did I love about the book. I'm sure everybody, if you read it, could say a different thing. I loved a little boy has everything he needs in his backpack. He can go and face the scariest animals, but in his backpack, there is a solution. And not only will that animal not be scary anymore, you might become friends with that, which is also very important to me. Like, what is it presenting to you? And if you could stay with that thing, it could shift, right? But it's very hard to stay, it's very scary, right? And to be able to teach children that, right? That you have, it's kind of like the red shoes, right? You already have inside of you what you need, it's okay. And you can meet something very scary, but stay with it for a minute. Why is it scary? Well, because it has a thorn in this thing, because, empathy. It's trying to teach empathy, right? So that's what the story's doing, but I have to make a movie, right? So it became much more about the dragon and him becoming friends, and that becoming the main relationship, right, of the story. Because in the first book, he doesn't even save the dragon for a really long time, right? But we knew in Act 1, he's got to save that dragon. So it became, again, about two boys having an adventure on an island. And the way the art comes in is, when I first saw the art for the island, it was so beautiful. And I was like, oh, this is a disaster. For the story, because he has to be afraid of this place. But it's so beautiful. I was like, no, we have to be scared to be here. Right? So that in Act 2, that beauty is revealing itself as his brain, as he's shifting his view of it, his belief about it is shifting. And when it shifts, he can see, oh, it's beautiful here too. Oh, there's animals to be friends with here. Oh, I want to save this place. Like that's a big shift for the character to go, this place is going to kill me, I got to get out of here as soon as possible, to I want to save it. So those are the kinds of things we talked about to help get 3 acts out of, the story could have been 2 acts, right? So that's kind of where we went, and then all the fun people he could meet. And we spent a lot of time talking about the antagonist. It was important to Nora and to me, but very important to Nora that he has his own legitimate point of view. he's doing, again, the best he can, what he thinks is the right thing. He would have a very good argument about why he's doing what he's doing. Again, he's wrong, but he is not wrong because he's the evil archetype. He's wrong because he has a got mixed up idea about what will work and what these animals really need. So everything had to be motivated from a very human place.
So maybe we have one last question.
I know I don't give sound bites, I'm sorry, but it's just not what I do. I don't know how to do that.
I have just a quick one.
Yeah.
If Riley was turning 30, what emotion would you introduce?
Oh my God, some people ask me about menopause, and I'm like, I don't think Riley's gonna get menopause. I don't know, maybe. Wouldn't that be great if you could take her all the way up through menopause? Hot flashes, and oh my God. We had a whole great thing about the worries, and yeah, that was an Inside Out one. I'm so past 30 now, I don't know. What was I doing? I was getting married at 30. You know, I think it's about 30, isn't it? That adult time of a new phase of your life is starting, right? What emotion would show up? I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna do it. We'll see, because as she gets too much older, you know, lots of stuff is starting that we'll see how they're gonna do it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Meg.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.